Section 1. The morning of rejection. The moment my alarm failed to blare, I knew something was terribly wrong. A heavy silence pressed in around me. No familiar heartbeat echoing through these walls. No gentle reminder of belonging. The sun's first pale rays sliced through the slats of my blinds, illuminating dust motes dancing in the stale air. My chest tightened. I'd overslept. A sudden, furious pounding at my door jolted me upright. "Get out of bed, Skylar!" My brother Jay's voice thundered through the thin wood, each word a hammer blow. "You need to make the pack breakfast." I shot to my feet, heart hammering. In the dim glow of my room, time seemed to stall, until my eyes locked onto the clock. 7:30 a.m. Panic twisted in my gut. The pack's morning ritual was sacred. Every weekday at sunrise, we gathered to share food, strategy, hierarchy, except I was always the outsider. I yanked my wardrobe door open, fingers fumbling as I wrestled with a pair of baggy jeans, a faded tank top, and a threadbare hoodie. I slid my feet into scuffed Converse and hastily tied my unruly red hair into a ponytail that threatened to unravel with every frantic motion. Outside my door, Jay's fists rapped again, as if he feared I'd vanish altogether. I breathed in sharply, steeling myself. Today, more than ever, I needed to move quickly. Because in our pack, lateness wasn't just a mark of disrespect. It was a license for ridicule. The hallway was cool, empty. I padded down the creaking stairs, the scent of yesterday's smoke still clinging to the air. At the doorway to the great kitchen, I paused, heart pounding like an infernal drum. I could almost hear their judgment before it landed, the snide whispers, the deliberate clink of cutlery as they refused to look at me. I crossed the threshold. My boots tapped the floor as I approached the counter, where flour dusted every surface. With practiced hands, I began whisking pancake batter, measuring each ingredient with mechanical precision. Heat from the griddle curled in sickly waves around me. I flipped each pancake with a whisper of hope that maybe this time, someone, anyone, would crack the hard shell of disdain and acknowledge me. At exactly 8 o'clock, the dining room. Doors swung open, and a parade of wolves, my pack, filed in. They grabbed plates without a glance. Their eyes were fixed on each other, on the alpha's empty seat at the head of the table. No soft words, no courtesy. I stood in the corner, clutching the final platter of golden pancakes, watching their backs retreat as they claimed their portions. Silence pressed in again. My throat tightened. I felt smaller than the shadows. Behind that empty chair sat the ruler of our world, our alpha, whose absence carried 1,000 unspoken accusations. Why didn't he show? Was he out hunting? Or was he deliberately avoiding me as well? They ate without care, laughter rippling through the room like poisoned arrows. I waited, pancake stack hovering at my hips, heart sinking with each passing heartbeat. At 8:15, their appetite sated. They rose and drifted away, into morning routines, into whispered allegiances, into a world I had no place in. The kitchen door shut softly behind them. I was alone, pancakes still warm in my hand. Their abandoned plates glinted under the fluorescent lights. I sank onto a stool, weight dragging me down, and took the first bite. Sweet maple syrup and soft batter filled my mouth, but even that taste felt hollow. Shadows pooled at the corners of the room. I closed my eyes, letting the silence roar in my ears. No one asked if I was hungry. No one cared that I was bleeding. Inside, I was the pack's errand girl, ignored, unseen, unworthy to sit among the wolves I had known since childhood. When the last crumb vanished, I rose on unsteady legs, dumped my empty plate in the sink, and readied myself for the day ahead. Outside, the world continued, students scattered across the lawn, the sky brightening. But here, in this hollow kitchen, I carried the weight of every dismissive glance, every unspoken slight. Just beyond the final doorway lay the beginning of a different battle. A 17-year-old girl alone in a vast, indifferent pack, bracing to face a world that had already rejected her. And as I stepped through that doorway, the question echoed in my mind, sharper than any fang. How much longer could I survive a family that saw me only as an embarrassment? Section 2. Hidden Independence. Even as my feet pounded down the front steps of the pack house, my mind was already racing toward sanctuary. The world behind me, smug faces, whispered condemnations, empty chairs, faded into a blur of gray, morning light. I clenched my jaw and forced my legs to keep moving, heart beating a rapid tattoo against my ribs. Every step carried me further away from their scorn and closer to the one place they could never touch. By the time I reached the edge of our territory, sweat was already clinging to my skin. I paused at the fringe of the forest, eyes scanning the trunks for movement. No pack members were following, another small victory earned by disappearing acts and practiced silence. I took a deep breath and let the pine-scented air fill my lungs, steadied myself for the ritual that came next. Night after night, I'd crept out under cover of darkness, slipping through the border where the forest grew too thick for others to follow. There, half hidden beneath overgrown ivy and a withered ash tree, lay an unassuming steel door, my ticket to freedom. I punched in the code I'd memorized, and the door swung open with a soft hiss, revealing the narrow spiral of stairs that led down into darkness. My hidden garage. At the bottom, a single bare bulb flickered, casting long shadows on cinderblock walls. A solitary car rested on a cracked concrete slab. My 2012 red Range Rover Evoque, polished to a low sheen despite the dwindling light. Its gleaming curves were a stark contrast to the rough timber beams overhead and the spiderweb of exposed pipes above. This was my refuge, a rented garage paid for in secret, stocked with the trappings of a life I'd built away from the pack's judgment. I ran my fingers along the door handle, feeling the smooth leather upholstery beneath my palm. In this space, I was not unworthy. I was not ugly, lazy, or an embarrassment. Here, I was someone who could decide her own fate, who refused to let prejudice dictate her worth. The proof of my rebellion. I slid into the driver's seat and sank back, exhaling a long, slow breath. Under the dashboard, a small shoebox contained the real proof of my defiance. My driver's license, tucked between faded photographs of my last birthday, and a few crumpled dollar bills scraped together just enough to cover the monthly rent. I'd secretly passed my test at 75 miles per hour, nerves humming like electricity. They'd mocked my curves and deemed me too slow, told me I'd never be pack material. But these keys jingled a different truth. I turned the ignition. The engine purred, an inky resonance that felt almost too powerful for someone so small. As the taillights glowed amber, I caught my reflection in the rearview mirror. Tangled red hair pinned in a loose bun, dark circles beneath my green eyes, lips pressed into a determined line. I smiled, just a fraction. No one else would ever see this version of me. A space all my own. Behind the Rover, I'd lined the back wall with plastic crates holding my most cherished possessions, journals filled with half-legible confessions, dog-eared paperbacks with pages bent to bookmarks, and a battered tackle box filled with tools, wrenches, screwdrivers, cleaning rags, everything I needed to keep this sanctuary running. This was my workshop and my sanctuary, my fortress of solitude nestled beneath the pack's very noses. Here, I could change tires at dawn or tune the engine at dusk. Here, I could blast my favorite playlists, songs that spoke of escape, of self-discovery, of standing tall in a world determined to shove you down. When the pack's hypocrisy stung the deepest, when they praised strength and unity yet beat me for daring to be myself, I came here and reclaimed my power, one turn of a wrench at a time. The pack's double standard. They said girls like me couldn't drive until I'd earned the right by slimming down, by proving my commitment to the pack's ideals. They demanded I burn off the fat before I could get behind a wheel. Yet every night, at their empty feast, I watched them polish off plate after plate of pancakes I made. Pancakes I had no right to eat. They drank from golden goblets that I'd washed, lounged in chairs I'd cleaned, yet they had the audacity to forbid me from the world's roads. In my garage, those cruel edicts dissolved. My car didn't care about my waistline or my stuttered apologies. It only responded to my firm grip on the wheel and my unspoken promise to never surrender. Fueling viewer curiosity. As the engine's hum lulled me into stillness, I traced, a finger along the cracked dashboard, wondering how much longer I could keep this hidden life afloat. The pack was changing. Rumors of mate selection and shifting loyalties had begun to swirl through the trees like a restless wind. Soon, their secrets might lead them right to my door. I sat in the hush, heart steadying, mind sharpening. Each breath in the sacred space reminded me I was more than their cast-off. I was a survivor, a rebel, a wolf who carved her own path through the underbrush of hypocrisy. With one last look at my hidden refuge, I turned the key and watched the light fade. Steel door groaned closed behind me, sealing away the proof of my independence, until the world outside forced me to claim it again. And one day, they would. Section 3. Classroom torment. A cold gray sky hung over the schoolyard like a warning. I crossed the cracked asphalt with my head down, each footstep sounding louder in my ears than the last. The chain-link fence rattled in the wind, echoing, the whispers that trailed behind me. I could feel their eyes, sharp, accusing, burning into my skin. Every morning this place became an arena, and for me there was no truce. As I neared the rows of lockers, a sensation of dread curled in my stomach. 2 girls, their laughter brittle as broken glass, flanked me. They jabbed their elbows into my ribs, hard enough to hurl stars across my vision, and shoved me into the cold steel. My books tumbled to the ground like fallen soldiers. I knelt in slow motion, palms scraping against chipped paint. When I reached for my notebook, their sneakers kicked it out of reach, sending it skidding through a puddle. Water seeped into the pages, blurring inked dreams into indecipherable smudges. "Hey, murderer," a boy sneered from the other side of the corridor. His voice cut through the murmurs like a knife. "How's it feel knowing you killed your own father?" The words were spat, heavy with malice. A cluster of students froze mid-step, then scattered like startled birds, too afraid to defend me, too curious to look away. Even the teachers kept their distance, so busy with paperwork, they never noticed the bruises blooming on my arms. Or if they did, they turned their heads and wrote me off as a troublemaker. Rumors twisted through the hallways faster than wildfire. Some said I'd pushed him. Others claimed I lured him into the forest, where he collapsed in blood and shame. No one believed the letter pinned beneath his lifeless body, a trembling confession only I had read. My father's final words addressed to me lost their power once the pack's whispers drowned them out. I carried his memory in the hollow, ache behind my ribs, where fear and sorrow made a home I could never escape. My mother's death had been the prologue to this torment. I still remembered her laughter echoing through our small kitchen, the gentle rise and fall of her chest as she sipped tea. When her heart failed under the weight of expectations and secrets, she left me with a world of half-spoken truths. My father, broken by grief, surrendered to the darkness next. I found him on the cold floor, his life seeping out, a note clutched in his quivering hand. Alone in their silence, I became the pack's scapegoat, unworthy, unlovable, unforgiven. They didn't see my silent protests. As I stood, the girls shoved me again, this time into the side of a locker door. My hip collided with steel. Pain, bloomed like black roses across my side. I gasped, but no one came to help. They hustled past me whispering, "Watch your step, killer." Their casual cruelty stung worse than any blow. I pressed my palms into my temples, fighting nausea and the urge to curl into myself. Inside the classroom, a stale hush settled over me. Desks lined up like silent judges, chalk dust drifting in the mid-morning light. The teacher's back was turned, scribbling equations that looped over the blackboard. My seat, at the very edge, felt like a cell. I sank into it, dragging my bruised side against the hard plastic. A boy 2 rows over flicked his pencil, sending sparks of graphite across the desk. Another reminder that I didn't belong. Every whispered rumor echoed in my mind. She killed her father. She deserves to be alone. I traced the throbbing bruise on my cheek, fingertips trembling. My pulse thundered in my ears. If I pressed harder, the skin might split, but I needed to remember the pain. It was proof I was still alive. When the bell finally rang for lunch, I gathered my books with silent, trembling hands. The world outside sat in neat cliques, sharing secrets over trays of cafeteria food. No one waved or offered a seat. A few. Girls leaned in close, muttering conspiratorially, their eyes bright with fascination and contempt. I forced my shoulders back and walked past, pretending I couldn't hear them. In that moment, the sky outside cracked open with winter sunlight. It caught on the metal lines of the windows and warmed my face. For a heartbeat, I felt something unnameable. Hope? Defiance? Bubbling beneath my ribs. They thought they could break me with rumors and bruises, but they didn't know the steel hiding in my heart. They didn't know that, behind every scar, I carried a story they could never rewrite. As I stepped out into the courtyard, the wind teased my tangled red hair around my shoulders. I lifted my chin and met the world head-on, survivor, not victim. And though their whispers would follow me home, I carried with me the fierce, unspoken promise. I would not be defined by their cruelty. Not today. Not ever. Section 4. Collision with Destiny. A hush fell over the corridor as late morning light slanted through high windows, dust motes dancing in golden shafts. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat echoing in my ears. I'd been lost in my own world. Eyes fixed on the floor, mind replaying every bruise, every whispered deceit. In that same moment, I launched forward, distracted, desperate for invisibility. But invisibility shattered with a brutal crash. Books exploded from my arms, textbooks and notebooks colliding with polished lockers in a thunder of clattering metal. Spine jolts, paper fanned into the air. I tasted panic on my tongue. My head whipped up, expecting just another taunt or shove. Instead, I saw him. Alpha Xavier. He stood like some dark statue, tall and impossibly perfect, framed by the narrow hallway light. His storm gray eyes met mine for a fraction of a heartbeat, flickering with something unreadable, before he stepped forward, unflinching. The entire schoolyard vanished behind us. Every laugh, every mocking whisper drained away, leaving only the tense space between our bodies. "I'm sorry," I managed, voice small as a prayer. My books lay at our feet, wet and scattered. I reached to gather them, but his hand shot out, stopping me cold. His palm pressed decisively against my chest, firm, unyielding. A surge of power rippled from him, warm and alien, straight into my chest. My wolf raged against the barrier. We were mates, bound, howling with primal certainty. Yet I stumbled backward, knees weak, as if pulled in 2 directions at once. "Don't," he said, low and clipped. His voice held an impossible chill. "Stay away." Air rushed from my lungs. His words struck like ice. The corridor seemed to tilt. Fluorescent lights blurred overhead. He looked down at me, lips a pale line, eyes hard as if carved from steel. Xavier. My own name trembled out, laden with disbelief. My pulse screamed with hope that he would claim me, remember our bond, undo the cruel fate of my pack's rejection. But there was no flicker of that ancient promise in his gaze. His jaw tensed. My mate was supposed to be flawless, he said, stepping back. Each word landed with bone-crunching finality. Beautiful. Perfect. You're none of that. A gasp caught in my throat as tears pooled on my lashes. My wolf howled in silent agony. Our connection severed. A line snapped in the darkness. Where once I'd felt electricity dancing through my veins, I now felt only a void, a hollow ache that seemed to stretch down to my soul. He raised his chin, voice brittle. I reject you. Skylar Marks. I, Xavier James, Alpha of the Moonbeam Pack, here and now revoke you as my mate. The words echoed in my ears, each syllable tearing at my heart like a blade. Students paused in the hall, eyes wide, whispers blooming like black flowers. My brother's laughter, once a distant echo, seemed to haunt the rafters. In that moment, I was someone else's entertainment, tragic, unworthy. I blinked through a veil of tears, saw the faint shimmer of residual bond magic flicker and die between us. A storm of emotion, shame, heartbreak, fury, surged in my chest. I tried to speak, to beg him to stay, but my voice dissolved in his cold retreat. He turned, shoulders rigid, gait measured. With each step, he carried away my last shred of hope. By the time his silhouette disappeared around the corner, I stood alone amid the wreckage of my books and my dreams. Silence roared in my ears. The distant bell clanged, but I barely registered it. Corridor lights hummed. I pressed a hand to my chest, where the bond's warmth had once glowed like a living ember. Now it was ash, cold, gone. The world stuttered back into focus. Classmates staring, their eyes a blend of pity and curiosity. A spilled cup of coffee steaming in its flimsy plastic cup. A single red leaf drifting through an open window. I sank to my knees among the ruined pages, cradling the scattered notebooks as if they were the only things left that belonged to me. Beneath the weight of my grief, a fierce ember flickered. What now? No pack to call family. No mate to anchor. Me. The path forward yawned, dark and uncertain. But as my wolf stilled its endless lament, a spark of defiance kindled. I would not vanish into this rejection. I would rise from these ruins, stronger, fiercer, free. But for this moment, I remained kneeling in the corridor's harsh light, a fallen heroine at the crossroads of destiny. The question burned hotter than any wound. What now? And somewhere, deep inside, I sensed that the answer, in its own brutal, cinematic way, was already taking shape. Section 5. Flight into the night. The final bell rang like a death knell. Skylar bolted from her desk, heart hammering, blood roaring in her ears, as if every second at Moonbeam High were a countdown to her undoing. Hallways blurred past, in a smear of lockers and frightened glances. Each footstep pounded an urgent drumbeat. Run, run, before he can stop you. She burst through the front doors into the crisp afternoon air, shoulder-length hair whipping around her face. The campus fell away behind her. The statue of the founding Alpha. The rows of neat shrubbery. The shuttered windows of classrooms where she once believed she might belong. Now all of it felt like a cage. Her car key, cold and familiar, was clenched in her palm. She sprinted down the sidewalk, backpack and textbooks jostling against her back, tears hot on her cheeks. Behind her, whispers chased her through the quad. Did you see? She's leaving already, but Skylar heard only her own frantic heartbeat. Moonlight spilled across the driveway of the pack house, silvering the heavy oak door she'd passed through countless times. Tonight, it would be the last threshold she crossed. Inside, she moved like a ghost. Hallways smelled of pine cleaner and old leather. Comforting once, now suffocating. She crept past the Alpha's quarters, past the communal dining room, where laughter still echoed from an earlier dinner. Shadows clung to corners like secrets. In her bedroom, hers by default, but never by right, she exhaled into the dim. A single lamp glowed on the bedside table, illuminating stacks of textbooks, dirty laundry, and the half-empty photograph frame of her mother's smiling face. Her pack-issue uniform lay crumpled on the floor, the faded gray hoodie, the worn jeans. She snatched them up, gripping them like talismans of the life she was about to abandon. One by one, she rifled through her dresser drawers, pulling out essentials. A change of clothes, a battered journal, a map of the county. Then she found it. A slim envelope, yellowed at the edges. Inside lay her father's last letter. Never sent to anyone, but kept as proof that she was more than the pack's scapegoat. Beneath it, a scrap of paper. Her secret garage key, taped under the bed frame. Her breath hitched. 3 minutes later, she was in the garage. Cold cement walls, echoing with the drip of a distant leak. Her Range Rover sat waiting, headlights dimmed, paint still gleaming red despite months of secrecy. Skylar slid inside, locked the door, and stared at the dashboard. Outside, a distant wolf howl punctured the night. She swallowed hard, fingers trembling as she used her free hand to open the glove compartment. Inside lay her mother's silver bracelet and a small wooden box of family photos. She pressed the bracelet against her chest, tears spilling as love and loss crashed through her. She closed the box, placed it gently on the passenger seat, and sank into the driver's seat. The engine rumbled to life, an awakening roar that felt like liberation. Back in her bedroom, the single lamp flickered as if sensing her departure. Skylar returned for one final act. On the desk lay a pen and a half-empty journal. She wrote 12 lines, each word shaped by heartbreak and defiance. Dear Moonbeam. Pack, I was your sunrise and your sacrifice, your maid, your whipping post, your shame. Tonight, I reclaim my story. You will not break me again. I leave to honor the love I once lost, and to find strength in the silence you could never crush. Goodbye, Skylar Marks. She folded the note neatly, placed it atop the open journal, and set both aflame with the lighter she carried in her pocket. The paper curled, smoke rising in lazy spirals, carrying her anguish into the rafters. Ash drifted to the floor like fallen feathers. Headlights swept the garage as she reversed onto the winding road, gravel crunching under tires. Behind her, the pack house receded into a dim orange glow. Above, the moon rose full and watchful, her tears dried on her cheeks, replaced by a cool determination. Her wolf stirred within, quiet, proud, and alert. She guided the rover toward the border of their territory, each mile stripping away old chains. Midnight air filled the cabin as she accelerated onto the highway, headlights cutting through the tunnel of trees. In her rearview mirror, the last glimpse of the pack's lights winked out. Beyond lay the unknown, a world without the Moonbeam Pack's cruelty, without cruel rejection, but also without safety nets. She was alone, carrying only a handful of memories and the stubborn ember of hope. As the road stretched beneath her wheels, Skylar pressed her hand against the dashboard, feeling its steady hum. Her new journey had begun, a flight into the night, toward freedom or ruin. She did not yet know which, but one truth shone brighter than any fear. She would choose her own destiny. And with that, the world ahead opened wide, dark, wild, and filled with possibility. The question now was not who rejected her, but who would she become? End of Section 5. Section 6. Run through the woods. The hum of the engine was a lifeline in the darkness. Skylar's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel as the odometer ticked past 12, then 1,300 miles behind her. Outside, the highway stretched, straight and empty, flanked by black silhouettes of trees that whispered secrets in the wind. Each mile carried her farther from Moonbeam's cruelty, and closer to a terrifying, exhilarating unknown. Tears finally slipped free. They fell in streaks she couldn't wipe away fast enough, tracing hot paths down her cheeks as she drove. The world beyond the windshield blurred into smeared ribbons of silver and obsidian. Her grief was a weight in her chest, pushing down until each breath felt like inhaling knives. She let it wash over her in raw waves. Anger at her pack, sorrow for the family she'd lost, shock at the love that had shattered. Yet in that storm of tears, she discovered a strange clarity. The road, lit only by her headlights, offered absolution. No judgments, no echoing taunts, no closed doors, just asphalt and the steady drone of the engine. At mile 150, she turned off the highway onto a narrow back road, gravel crunching beneath her tires. The forest closed in, pressed so close it felt like lungs inhaling around her car. She drove 6 hours in near silence, the tape deck long since silenced. By the time she spotted the wooden sign, Cedar Ridge Reserve, next 20 miles. Dawn was a faint bruise on the horizon. A sliver of pale gold melted into dark blue sky. Skylar eased the rover onto a rutted pull-off and killed the engine. For a moment, the world held its breath. She climbed out into the damp chill. Morning dew clung to pine needles, and the air smelled of earth and pine sap, a scent so pure it almost stung. Skylar pressed her palms against the hood, leaning forward, to catch gulping breaths. Her face was slick with streaked tears and dried mascara, her hair tangled like the forest underbrush. There was nowhere else to go. No more pack boundaries, no more human roads marked by pack patrols. She shouldered her bag. Nothing but a water bottle, a granola bar, her father's letter tucked inside, and stepped into the trees. The forest greeted her with a chorus of bird calls and the rustle of small creatures in the undergrowth. Each footfall pressed through soft needles and damp leaves. Skylar ran, at first tentative, then with building urgency, as if flight alone could outrun the ghosts of rejection. Her breath came ragged, white in the cool morning air. Pain bloomed in her calves, but she ignored it. Every pound of her heart brought a measure of freedom. Pain was better than numbness. Tears streamed unchecked, saltwater baptism marking this new frontier. She sprinted deeper, branches brushing her arms, tearing tiny slices of skin that stung delightfully, reminding her she was alive. The underbrush gave way to a small clearing. Sunlight filtered through haphazard columns of pine, spotlighting the dew-drenched grass. Skylar skidded to a halt, chest heaving. She dropped to one knee, head bowed. The forest echoed her sobs. For the first time in her life, she did not fight the tears. Each cry released a fragment of her former self. The shy pack slave, the rejected mate, the obedient maid. When her throat went raw and the sobs subsided to shaky breaths, she sat back on her heels. A breeze sifted through the branches and the clearing seemed to pulse with life. Green moss, tiny wildflowers, the distant promise of a stream. Skylar lifted her face, letting the dawn touch her skin. A single tear lingered at the corner of her eye, but her chest felt lighter. She was alone, and in that solitude, found the first flicker of something precious. Hope. A spark that dared to suggest she could carve a new story, write her own destiny beyond the pack's narrow definitions. She rose on trembling legs, brushed grass and twigs from her jeans, and squared her shoulders. The forest path called her onward. Somewhere ahead lay a river, fresh water and fish. Beyond that, cabins and trails where no one would know her name. Skylar would find shelter, earn her keep, heal on her own terms. With one last glance at the tranquil clearing, her baptism in freedom, she stepped back onto the path. The forest swallowed her silhouette, and the wind wove through the pines as if whispering encouragement. Her journey had begun not at dawn, but in that night of flight. Here, in the wild, grief and freedom met, forging a path only she could follow. Every step forward carried her away from pain, and closer to a life of her own making. And as Skylar pressed into the ever-darkening woods, something inside her stirred, the fierce, unwavering pulse of survival and the hard-won promise of a new dawn. Section. Title: A New Alpha's Discovery. Dawn was still a pale whisper over the treetops when Damian's ears pricked at the faintest keening on the wind. He and his brothers, Josh, Daniel, and Jacob, had risen long before sunrise, uneasy, under the weight of Skylar's disappearance. Now, as the forest stirred to life, a solitary sob broke through the birdsong, soft yet unmistakable. Damian exchanged a grim nod with Josh. No words were needed. They all heard it. Daniel and Jacob fell in beside them as they followed the sound, moving in single file through the thick carpet of pine needles. Each footfall was measured, careful not to snap twigs that might spook whatever lay ahead. But the sobbing continued, heartbreaking, raw, ablaze with grief. The path cut deeper into the woods, narrowing until branches scraped Damian's shoulders, and the canopy overhead wove shadow and light into a shifting mosaic. He inhaled, catching Skylar's scent on the breeze. A mingling of pine sap, dew-soaked earth, and something uniquely her own. Resilience laced with despair. His pulse thundered in his ears. He allowed himself a sliver of hope. Up ahead, Daniel paused. Wordlessly, he pointed to a half-hidden clearing. The mist curled low, coiling around a lone figure. Damian raised a hand. The others halted. Through the thinning fog, they saw her. Skylar, knees pressed to cold stone, hair a tangle of red and gold glinting in the dawn light, face buried in her arms. Her body shook with quiet sobs that tugged at Damian's heart. He stepped forward, each stride lengthening until the clearing swallowed him. Jacob's soft bark in his mind warned to move gently. She was fragile, fractured. Yet Damian could not stop himself. He knelt at the edge of the clearing, watching her back rise and fall. The bruises on her arms, mottled purple and fading yellow, spoke of horrors he had barely imagined. His throat tightened. Skylar. His voice was low, trembling. At the sound, she stiffened, head snapping up. Her eyes, usually so guarded, were wild, wide with fear and tears. For a heartbeat, Damian was blinded by their depth, emerald glass flecked with gold, radiating sorrow and an unspoken plea. In that instant, she looked celestial, an angel wounded, fallen from grace, and utterly alone. Josh and Daniel hovered behind him, concern etched on their faces. Jacob's quiet growl reassured them all. She was alive. But Damian felt a new responsibility harden in his chest. He stood, offering a hand. "It's me," he said softly, voice steadying. "Damian." Skylar blinked, confusion and relief, warring in her gaze. She stared at his extended hand, then at his face, etched with worry and something gentler, almost reverent. The forest held its breath. Skylar hesitated, chest heaving, then reached out. Damian lifted her trembling hand, pressing it to his cheek, where it felt too cold and yet achingly familiar. "You're safe," he murmured. Behind him, his brothers closed in, forming a silent circle of protection around her fragile form. As Skylar's tears slowed, and she let herself lean into his support, Damian's mind spun with questions and regrets. How had they failed her? How had she suffered alone? But those thoughts vanished in the wonder of simply seeing her, whole and breathing, her spirit unbroken. The moment stretched, luminous and profound, charged with the promise of a new beginning. In the hush of the clearing, beneath the vaulted green cathedral of pines, the new Alpha made a silent vow. He would never let her face the darkness again. And as Skylar's sobs softened into quiet sobs of relief, Damian realized that this discovery, finding her here, in the heart of the wild, was the start of a redemption neither of them could have foreseen. Section title: First Contact. Damian led Skylar into a small clearing where the pale morning light filtered through pine needles, dusting the ground in gold. He held out a canteen of cool spring water. "Here," he offered, voice low. But Skylar recoiled, arms crossed over her bruised ribs. The gesture was innocent enough, hydration after a panicked flight. But to her, it felt like another march toward dependency. "I don't need your water," she snapped, though her throat burned with thirst. Damian's brow furrowed. He took a cautious step back, remembering that healing required patience. "I'm sorry," he said, and nearly choked on the words. Apologies had never been his strong suit. He started, then stopped, scrubbing a hand over his neck. "I should have found you sooner." Skylar's eyes narrowed. "You didn't even know I was missing." Her tone was cold, measured. Pack. Etiquette for "I don't trust you." Damian closed his eyes for a moment. He could not undo the past, nor erase the pain she'd endured. He offered water again, this time placing it on a rock at a respectful distance. "My fault. I heard you crying, but—" He swallowed. "I thought it was an animal. I should have recognized your scent." Skylar hesitated, her wolf flickering at the edge of her consciousness. She hated that she still smelled of pack territory. Vulnerability flashed in her emerald eyes. She knelt, eyes fixed on the canteen. But when Damian tilted it toward her, she jerked away. "Fine," she muttered, grabbing the canteen with trembling fingers. Each sip made her skin prickle, as if she were drinking poison, not water. Damian knelt beside her, careful not to crowd. Her space. "I brought you clothes," he said, pulling a folded hoodie and sweatpants from his pack. Damaged, but clean. He held them out. Skylar stared at the fabric. It bore the Moonbeam Pack crest, an unfamiliar symbol, but also a promise of sanctuary. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't let herself feel in days. Uncertainty. "Why would I wear that?" Damian's cheeks colored. "Because you belong somewhere safe, not out here alone." He took a tentative breath. "My pack is welcoming. I promised you refuge." Refuge. A mocking word. Skylar glanced at the circle of trees, the soft rustle of branches overhead. The woods had been her only home these past hours, but the forest offered no warmth, no food, no answers. She looked at Damian's outstretched hands, hands that could protect her, but also hands that might crush her under the weight of pack politics. "I don't need rescuing," she said, pulling her jacket tighter across her chest. "I survived this long." "I know," Damian replied, voice gentle. "You're strong, but strength sometimes hides wounds. Let me help with the healing." His words were earnest, but the cultural misstep came swiftly. He reached to brush a lock of hair from her face. "Don't touch me," Skylar snapped, flinching back. Damian froze, her warning echoing in the clearing. In his pack's tradition, such a gesture would be tender, an intimate sign of care, but here it was a breach of her boundary. He swallowed hard, retreating an extra foot. "I'm sorry, I forgot. I'm not your alpha." His apology was awkward, stumbling against his pride. I care." Skylar's wolf fluttered behind her eyes. No one had ever used that tone with her, soft, earnest, vulnerable. She looked at the hoodie in his hand, at the clean lines of its stitching. The moonbeam crest felt suddenly less like a symbol of hypocrisy and more like an invitation. "I'll take the clothes," she said quietly, surprising him. Damian nodded, relief and curiosity mingling on his face. He knelt, holding the hoodie, at arm's length. "Here." Skylar peeled off her damp, blood-stained tank top. Each movement made her flinch. Damian tore his own shirt beneath the pack crest, careful not to expose her further, and draped it around her shoulders with a protective flourish. The fabric was soft against her bruised skin. She shivered, both from the cool air and the intimacy of the act. Damian fumbled, embarrassment tinting his cheeks. "You should shift soon," he muttered. "Your body needs rest." "Shift?" She tilted her head, curious despite herself. "If you go fully wolf, you'll heal faster. And the pack can help." The words were gentle, free of any pressure. Skylar stared at him. In that moment, she saw beyond the alpha facade. She saw a man who had risked pride and protocol to bring her water, clothes, and a safe word: sanctuary. For a heartbeat, the world held still. The forest expanded. Birds paused mid-song. Even the breeze stilled to hear her answer. Skylar lowered her hand, brushing the fabric of the hoodie. "Sanctuary," she whispered, voice soft. Damian offered a cautious smile, ancient moonlight glinting in his eyes. "Always." And as she donned the hoodie, its crest pressed against her heart, Skylar felt the first crack in her armor, a subtle invitation to trust. In return, Damian vowed to guard her silence, her scars, and her shattered soul, until she found the courage to rise again. Section title: Unveiling the Scars. Skylar stepped across the threshold of Damian's pack house, the weight of dawn still clinging to her shoulders. Inside, the long communal hall lay hushed, a row of windows catching pale light, tables neatly set for the midday meal. She wore Damian's oversized hoodie, its sleeves swallowed by her trembling hands. Behind her, Damian, Josh, Daniel, and Jacob exchanged nervous glances. They'd known she carried more than grief in her chest. Now, finally, they would see the truth. "Let me help you," Josh whispered, his voice catching on something tender and afraid. Skylar froze. The hoodie, her armor, was tangled at her waist. She closed her eyes, but the room did not vanish. The pack's steady breathing pressed in around her. Damian reached out. "Skylar, just for a moment, let us see." Her wolf roared inside, warning her to retreat. But her human heart ached for solace. With a small shudder, she lifted the hoodie shoulder, then halted. Daniel moved forward, soft-footed. "We're here," he said, voice low. No judgment. Taking a breath that felt like it could crack her ribs, Skylar peeled the fabric down. The room crackled with tension. First, a startled gasp from Damian. Then Josh's lips parted and Daniel blinked against the sight. Her arms bore the dark blue crescents of old bruises. Across her ribcage, pale yellow fading into soft lavender. And down her back, faint whip marks, silver from healed wounds, ghosting her skin like a cruel lace. Silence fell heavier than any blow. Skylar's eyes stung as tears rose, tears she'd held back for countless sunrises. She arched her bruised torso, then let herself slouch in shame. I tried to hide them, she managed, voice brittle. I didn't want pity. Damian's hand hovered, trembling, then settled gently on her shoulder. You deserve care, not pity, he said. Across the room, Jacob knelt beside her, touching a bruise on her forearm as though it were sacred. I'm so sorry, he whispered. No one should ever... He choked, his voice breaking. Josh leaned close, his eyes swimming with compassion. He took her other arm and traced a line through the bruises with his finger, as tenderly as one might follow a childhood scar. "We should have known. We should have listened." Daniel stepped forward, unfastening the crisp pack crest from their gear. He folded it and placed it on the table. "Your scars tell a story of survival," he said. "You're our sister. Now, let us carry part of your burden." Skylar's lips trembled. Images of her past, her brother's fist, the rejection in Xavier's eyes, flashed in her mind. But here, Anthony's hands kind, Salim's quiet tears, Josh's fierce protectiveness. Her throat tightened. "I don't know how to ask," she admitted, voice raw with relief and terror. Damian gathered her into a wraparound hug, careful not to press against the bruises. "You don't have to ask. We choose you." His breath warmed her ear. "Let us help you heal." From the corner, a soft sob. It was Meryl, the pack's healer, stepping forward with tinctures and salves. "I've prepared a balm," she said, voice gentle. "It will ease the swelling and help you rest." Skylar blinked through tears as Meryl knelt and dabbed the salve on her ribs. Each touch was a benediction. The pain loosened its grip, replaced by a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Compassion. Josh wiped his eyes on his sleeve. "Sky, you're more than your scars. But they matter to us. All of us." He straightened, meeting each pack member's gaze. "This is not how we treat our own." One by one, the pack rallied. Beta Violet pressed a fresh blanket into Skylar's hands. "You can rest here," she offered. "We'll take first watch." Elder. Rowan appeared at the doorway, head bowed. "I meant only to guide you," he murmured, shame softening his tone. "I failed. Forgive me." Skylar shook her head. But in that movement, she found unexpected grace to forgive. Damian released her from the hug, stepping back but never letting her go. "You are safe," he declared, voice steady. "Under this roof, we stand by you." Skylar's tears spilled free now, tears of sorrow and of hope. She inhaled the scent of pinewood, of healing balm, of unwavering loyalty. Each breath filled the hollow places in her chest. Thank you," she whispered. Her voice broke, but the pack did not stir. They honored her vulnerability with stillness. In that hush, Skylar realized the true power of this moment, the silent promise etched in every face around her. Here, her wounds would be tended, not hidden. Here, her story would be honored, not erased. And here, at last, she would learn to trust again. And in the soft glow of dawn spilling through those windows, the pack lifted her burdens, together forging a new chapter, one not defined by scars, but by strength, compassion, and the unbreakable bonds of family. Section title: A Child's Compassion. Little Timothy hovered by the doorway to the infirmary, his tiny frame illuminated by the soft morning light filtering through the windows. He'd been silent during the healing, too young to understand everything, but old enough to sense Skylar's pain. As the others filed out to give her privacy, Timothy lingered, his brow furrowed with genuine concern. His hand found the edge of a wooden stool, and he climbed up, determined to see the scars that had both horrified and united the pack. Skylar sat on the cot, wrapped in blankets. The pain salve Meryl applied still tingled on her bruises, numbing the worst of the hurt, but not the ache in her heart. Tears had fallen freely when Damian first saw the marks. Now she stared at her lap, dreading the world's pity. Every instinct urged her to bury herself beneath the covers and disappear. Instead, she heard Timothy's soft voice. "Skylar?" he asked, stepping forward with the wide-eyed earnestness only a child could muster. Why does it hurt you so much?" His question, innocent yet piercing, cut through her defenses like moonlight through the darkest night. The room went still. Damian, Meryl, Josh, Daniel, Jacob all froze at the sound of Timothy's gentle inquiry. No harsh whispers, no awkward glances, only silence heavy with compassion. Skylar's breath caught in her throat. The words she'd never uttered tumbled out in a trembling whisper. "Because sometimes people hurt the ones they're supposed to love," she said, her voice cracking. "And I didn't know how to stop them." Timothy's small hand reached out to touch her sleeve. "But you're safe now," he offered, as if reading her thoughts. "We'll keep you safe, right?" His question wasn't a plea. It was a promise made in purest devotion. Skylar's vision blurred with tears, not of shame, but of relief. Here was a creature of boundless innocence, linking his fate to hers. Damian moved first, kneeling beside her cot. He wrapped one protective arm around Skylar's shoulders, shielding her even from the memory of pain. "He's right," Damian rumbled, eyes fierce. "We are your pack. No harm that came before can follow. You hear?" His words carried the weight of every pledge their pack had ever made. Meryl and Josh bent to Timothy's level, offering him understanding smiles. "You have a big heart, Timothy," Meryl said softly. "Thank you for caring so much." Josh patted the boy's shoulder. "You remind us all why we protect each other." The pack's unity shone, unbreakable as steel tempered by fire. Skylar looked at Timothy, his innocent eyes shining with empathy, and felt something inside her shift. The wolf within rumbled, as if waking from a long slumber. Her human heart fluttered, fragile and hopeful. "Thank you," she managed, voice thick. "You're very brave." She lifted a trembling hand and tucked a stray curl behind his ear. The touch, tender and unconditional, sealed a bond no darkness could sunder. Timothy beamed, his courage swelling. "If you ever feel sad again, you can come find me," he promised. "I'll make you laugh with my silly dances." He hopped, in place, shuffling his feet in a goofy jig that made Skylar's lips curve into a genuine smile. Laughter bubbled up, first quiet, then freer, until the entire infirmary felt lighter. Daniel walked to the cot's foot and laid out warm blankets and pillows. Jacob retrieved a small wooden toy, a carved wolf, placing it gently in Skylar's hand. "For company," Jacob explained. "When you need a reminder, you're not alone." Each gesture, simple but profound, wove Skylar tighter into the pack's embrace. As Timothy climbed onto Skylar's lap, nestling against her side, Damian surveyed the circle of brotherhood around them. There, in that moment, the scars lost their power to define her. Instead, they became testament to her survival, and to the pack's unwavering loyalty. The innocence of a child had cracked her armor, allowing love to flood through the cracks. In the hush that followed, Skylar felt a warmth blossom in her chest, not just healing, but the promise of a future built on trust, compassion, and unity. And as Timothy's soft breathing lulled her into calm, she realized that true strength was not forged in isolation, but in the brave act of letting others carry your wounds and your hope. Section title: Approaching the Shift. Dawn's pale light seeps through the curtains like a silent promise. Today is Skylar's 18th birthday, the day she should finally shift. But instead of excitement, her heart pounds with dread. She stands before the mirror in Damian's pack house, tracing the delicate curve of her wrist, where even the faintest bruise has long since faded. 18 years of waiting, of hoping for the wolf inside her to awaken. And now, with her mate bond severed, she fears nothing will happen at all. The room is still. In the hallway, muffled footsteps hint at the pack's morning ritual. Alpha Damian calling them together for breakfast, the chatter of brothers and sisters anticipating her rite of passage. But Skylar cannot join them yet. She needs a moment, alone, One last moment to steel herself against the pulse of pain buried in her chest. She closes her eyes and drifts into memory. Flashback 1. The cold hallway at school. Her books slip from trembling fingers. Xavier's boots thud closer. His voice, clipped and merciless. "You're not my mate." The searing crack of their bond snapping apart. Her wolf's howl echoing in her mind like a dying star. Flashback. That night in the pack house, the circle of packmates surrounding her bed. Damian's eyes brimming with sorrow, brushing away her tears. The salve of their compassion, but still, her heart hollowed by rejection. Flashback. The horror, promise of safety in the woods, the 6-hour drive, her feverish sprint beneath a canopy of stars. She felt free then, but freedom tastes bitter if the wolf refuses to stir. Her pulse thunders in her throat. 18, orphaned by death, abandoned by her mate, rescued by strangers who became her only family. And now, the shift looms like a cliff at night's edge. If she falters, she risks never knowing her true power. If she succeeds, she must face the world as something both human and wild. She opens her eyes. The packhouse mirror reflects a pale girl with fiery hair and green-flecked eyes, but also a flicker of steel. Skylar exhales. She sweeps a lock of hair behind her ear and steps out into the corridor. Gathering at dawn. The great hall is awash in morning light. Pack members cluster by the long table. Josh, Daniel, Jacob, even little Timothy perched on a stool, wide-eyed and clutching his wooden wolf toy. Damian stands at the head, his posture regal yet tender. As Skylar enters, a hush ripples through the assembly. Damian inclines his head. "Happy 18th, Skylar," he rumbles softly. "Are you ready?" She nods, voice barely a whisper. "Ready as I'll ever be." Josh hands her a simple silver circlet, a band inscribed with the pack's emblem. "For luck," he says with a shy grin. Daniel and Jacob flank her, offering nods of encouragement. Timothy tugs her skirt. "You'll do great," he chirps, as if reciting a sacred vow. Skylar grips the circlet, feeling its cool weight. She steps forward into the clearing outside, where the pack forms a wide circle beneath the dawn sky. The crisp air carries 1,000 scents: pine, dew, packmate's musk. And beneath it, something deeper. Her own wolf, buried and trembling. Heart of the forest. At the center, a single white stone marks the ceremonial spot. Damian stands, close, ready to guide her, but respectful of the space she must fill alone. Skylar inhales, feeling her heartbeat sync with the woodland chorus of birdsong and rustling leaves. She touches the stone with white-knuckled fingers, grounding herself. 18 years, she murmurs. 18 years of waiting. A tremor runs through her limbs. But without my mate, I don't know if I can become what I meant to be. A distant echo of laughter, Timothy's earlier reassurance, fills her ears. She closes her eyes and imagines Xavier's face, the cruel tilt of his lips as he denied their bond. Enough. She lets the memory slip away, replaced by Damian's steady presence behind her. A silent vow of protection. The moment before. Skylar raises her face to the sky. The sun has climbed but remains soft, as if holding its breath. She feels a pulse beneath her ribs, a faint stir that could be hope, or heartache. Her hands press to her chest, fingertips sliding over the fabric of her tank top. She tastes the morning air, copper, pine, and something wild, urgent. The pack grows still. No whispers, no shifting feet. Only her. Her pulse roars in her ears. "I am Skylar," she whispers. "Human, wolf, survivor." A single tear escapes, tracing a line down her cheek. She would have given anything to share this moment with Xavier, but he abandoned her. Now, this is hers alone. Cliffhanger. Her breath catches as a warmth blossoms in her belly. Her knees tremble. The first crack, a bone-deep echo, resounds in her bones. A soft howl rises from her throat. Unexpected, raw. The pack leans in, every gaze locked on her, but then silence. The crack does not widen. The warmth flickers and stalls. Skylar's heart sinks. She shakes her head, trying to summon the fire, again. "Come on," she pleads in a whisper, half to her wolf, half to herself. "Come on." A distant owl cries. The wind stills. Skylar stands alone in the clearing, circlet shining like a halo. She feels the world pivot, waiting for an answer only her body can give. Will she shift at all? Section title: Her First Wolf Shift. The moment began as a whisper of thunder through Skylar's veins. One heartbeat, and she stood trembling on the dew-damp earth, the pack's circle of faces a blur of soft concern around her. Mid-morning. Light filtered through the pines, painting her in dappled gold. She lifted a shaking hand to her chest and felt it first. A deep, resonant pulse, as if the forest itself had moved into her ribcage. Around her, the pack exhaled. Josh's encouraging nod, Daniel's steady gaze, Jacob murmuring, "You've got this." Damian watched with solemn pride. Skylar willed herself to breathe. "Now," she whispered to the wolf within. A single crack split the air, a sound of ancient bone awakening. Skylar's legs buckled and she sank to one knee as the world spun, slow and alive. She clenched the silver circlet in her fist. Its cool metal was the only anchor as a second crack lanced through her spine. A shiver raced along her vertebrae elongating inch by agonizing inch. Her muscles bulged beneath skin that pricked with sudden electricity. She bit back a gasp, tasting something wild, iron and pine, on her tongue. Fur erupted along, her arms in a living wave. Copper-red hairs sprouted like flames, licking down her sleeves. Skylar cried out, a raw, breath-catching sound that mingled pain with wonder. She curled her shoulders, felt her shoulder blades widen, her arms lengthen, the bones reshaping. The world around her sharpened. Each needle of light became a pinpoint, every rustle in the underbrush a thunderous footstep. A ripple of astonishment passed through the pack, but they held back, respecting the sacredness of her becoming. Her fingers stiffened into claws, curved and gleaming silver in the sun. Skylar flexed them, flexing the new sinew that braided her forearms. She rose on trembling legs now tipped with talon-sharp toes, vertebrae shifting into arches that formed her haunches. The ground beneath her paws thrummed as if greeting an old friend. A long, powerful tail unfurled behind her, her balance, her banner, her new heartstring. The world tilted and then steadied. She felt herself whole for the first time. A hush fell. Even the wind stilled to witness. Skylar inhaled, deeply, lungs flooding with air so crisp it burned. She tasted distant rain, the sweet tang of morning growth, the iron tang of her own blood. With that breath came clarity. She was both woman and wolf, fire and earth. She lifted her muzzle, familiar yet new, and closed her eyes. The scent of her pack, her sanctuary, wove around her. Damian's steady calm, Josh's quiet humor, Daniel's unwavering loyalty, Jacob's protective strength. Timothy's small but fierce faith fluttered in her chest. Then, with one last shuddering exhalation, she let go. A sound broke free. a long, jubilant howl that shook the treetops and rolled across moss and stone. Her roar carried the weight of rejection and the thrill of escape, the sorrow of broken bonds and the triumph of rebirth. The pack answered in kind, a chorus of howls that leapt from throat to forest, enveloping her in kinship. Skylar opened, her golden eyes glowing with the dawn of her true self, and raised her head high, every muscle singing with power. The light shifted as if in awe. In that instant, Skylar was no longer the frightened girl who raced through the woods. She was her wolf, fierce, free, unbroken. And as her triumphant roar faded into the pulse of the waking world, every heartbeat around her echoed the same truth. She had arrived. Section title: A Pack United. The lanterns in the great hall flickered like distant stars, casting golden pools of light over long wooden tables heaped with steaming bowls of venison stew, roasted root vegetables, and crusty bread fresh from the oven. Skylar paused at the entrance, breath catching in her throat. This was no cramped kitchen corner, no hushed whispering by the pantry door. This was home. A triumphant entrance. As she stepped forward, Damian rose from his seat at the head of the table. His posture was regal, shoulders squared, eyes bright with pride. And behind him sat his inner circle. Josh, the ever-steady beta, his warm grin lighting up the shadows. Daniel, the quiet sentinel whose calm gaze spoke of unwavering loyalty. And Jacob, the spirited warrior whose laughter rolled like distant thunder. Even little Timothy perched on a carved oak bench, beaming as though he'd been expecting this moment all his life. A hush fell. Skylar's heart pounded. Every pair of eyes in the hall turned to her. Then Damian lifted his goblet high, and his pack echoed his gesture in a unified chorus of clinks and cheers. A ritual of welcome. "Skylar," Damian's voice boomed, rich and welcoming. "Tonight, you dine with us as one of our own." A low murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Overhead, banners bearing the Moonbeam Pack's silver moon motif rustled in a gentle draft. From the rafters, fresh pine garlands scented the air, blending with the earthy aroma of stew and the soft spice of mulled cider. Josh handed Skylar a goblet. "To your first dinner as our sister," he toasted, his warm tone putting her at ease. Glasses clinked, and Skylar raised her cup, feeling a tremor of belonging. Breaking bread. The first spoonful of stew was warm and rich, each savory bite a testament to the care of the pack's cooks. Around her, wolves and humans sat side by side, elders with silver-streaked hair nodding encouragement, young recruits exchanging admiring glances. Daniel passed her a loaf of bread, tearing off a chunk and offering it with a gentle nod. "We hold nothing back," he said quietly. Skylar met his eyes and smiled, irony and gratitude swirling in her chest. Here, she was valued. Jacob, ever playful, had already loaded his plate with extra potatoes. He caught Skylar's eye and pointed conspiratorially toward the cider barrel, whispered, "You'll want seconds of that." She laughed, a clear, bright sound she hadn't used in years, and took a hearty sip. Sweet warmth blossomed in her chest. Stories around the flame. Between bites, Damian stood and cleared his throat. The hall silenced again. "Before tonight ends," he began, "the Moonbeam Pack shares its story, with you now part of it." He gestured to a circle of elders seated against the far wall. One by one, they rose to recount the pack's founding legends, of a moonlit hunt where they aided a stranded wolf who would become their first alpha, of battles fought against rival packs to defend their territory, of bonds forged in sacrifice and loyalty. Their voices wove a tapestry of courage and kinship. Skylar listened, riveted. Each tale was a thread that joined her to something greater than herself. She felt tears prick at her eyes, not of sorrow, but of profound gratitude. She realized how starved she'd been for this. Stories shared in open daylight, voices lifted in unison, the steady thrum of collective memory. Laughter and late-night warmth. As the tales concluded, the mood lightened. Josh challenged Jacob to an impromptu arm wrestling match across the table, drawing hoots of laughter. Daniel enacted a ridiculous dance he'd taught Timothy, who giggled uncontrollably. Even the elders cracked smiles at their youthful antics. Skylar found herself drawn into the laughter, her defenses melting away like morning frost. Damian settled beside her again. "Welcome," he said, voice soft now, "to a pack united, not by blood alone, but by choice." He guided her hand to rest on his, simple and sincere. Skylar felt the solidity of his promise. Here, she would never stand alone again. A new family. Dinner ended with honeyed pastries and sweet tea, the final comfort after a night of revelations. Skylar lingered as the pack began to drift toward the hearth for late-night fireside stories. She watched as old rivals shared quiet nods, as young cubs clambered onto laps hoping for a bedtime tale. There was warmth here she'd never known. Not just the glow of the fire, but the glow of shared purpose, of laughter, of safe harbor. As she rose to join the circle, Skylar looked back at the empty hall for a moment. Once a place of fear and isolation, now brimming with light and unity. With each step, her old life receded. With every voice she passed, she felt herself joining something eternal. Tonight, Skylar wasn't just a lone wolf searching the dark woods. She was a sister, a daughter, a pack member. Under the watchful moonlight that filtered through the grate hall's high windows, she embraced her new family, and they, in turn, welcomed her with open hearts, united at last. Section title: Restoring Lost Memories. The dawn light filtered through the high windows of Damian's study, painting the dust motes gold. Skylar sat on the low leather couch, fingers curled tightly around a cup of herbal tea. Around her, the room felt impossibly vast, its stone walls echoing with unspoken questions. Across the low table, Damian, Josh, Daniel, and Jacob exchanged solemn glances. Today, they would confront the greatest mystery of all. Who robbed Skylar of her? Pest a conspiracy of compassion. Damian stood and walked to an antique cabinet etched with the moonbeam crest. He retrieved a small wooden box, its lid polished smooth by generations of alphas before him. "This," he said, voice low, "holds the letters and relics the elders saved from your old life. We never destroyed them, but we did hide them, to protect you from the pain of what was done." Skylar's heart stuttered. Pain and betrayal mingled with gratitude. Her pack had shielded her, even in their hypocrisy. Fragments on the table. Josh gently lifted the lid. Inside lay an ivory hairpin carved with tiny moon symbols, a faded photograph of a family standing by a shimmering lake, and a torn scrap of yellowed paper inked with a familiar scrawl. "Skylar, remember who you are." Daniel placed each artifact on the table like precious stones. "We kept these safe," he whispered, "but you never asked. Until now." The memory wipe revealed. Jacob stepped forward, brows knitted. "When you ran away, the full truth came out. Your pack used a rare mind seal ritual to erase your worst memories, hoping you'd stay, hoping you'd endure. But it backfired. You lost everything. Your name, your past, your parents. It was meant to punish you, not to protect you." Skylar felt her throat constrict. The pack she fled had stolen her memories. And, in an ironic twist, those she found had hidden them again. A plan takes shape. Damian set down the photo. We can only restore your memories by triggering strong emotional echoes. We've prepared a series of moments, familiar scents, shared stories, and a single cue word from our youngest member. He turned to little Timothy, perched on the edge of the hearth. Timothy's wide eyes shone with solemn pride. "Sky," he repeated softly, voice clear as a bell. "Sky." At the sound of her true name, spoken by the one innocent enough to believe in her, something flickered in Skylar's mind. The first cue. Sky. Outside the study door, Josh had arranged a tableau. The cramped hallway where she first ran into Xavier, now recreated with scent-dipped cloths and candlelight. Timothy stepped forward, cue-lit word trembling on his lips. "Sky," he called, cheeks flushed. At that single echo, Skylar's breath caught. A whirlwind of flash, a bright corridor, a crash of bodies, a whisper of fur, then emptiness. She pressed a hand to her temple, eyes fluttering. The cue had unlocked a shuttered door. Fragments rekindled. Over the next hour, each artifact and cue ignited tiny sparks of recollection. The hairpin brought a chill of recognition, her mother's final gift. The photograph whispered the shape of joy she'd once known. Daniel read aloud a passage from her childhood diary, lovingly transcribed by Jacob. Each word made her wince with remembered emotion, laughter and heartbreak held in the same fragile lines. Damian's gentle guidance. Damian knelt beside her, voice soft as falling snow. "Let it come, however slowly. There is no rush." He pressed the photo of her parents into her hands. She traced their faces, her father's gentle eyes, her mother's warm smile, then felt tears break free. For a moment, she trembled on the brink of overwhelming grief. But Damian's steady presence kept her anchored in the present. Timothy's unwavering faith. Timothy climbed into her lap, wrapping his small arms around her. "Mommy," he whispered, "I knew you'd remember." His unguarded belief struck Skylar like sunrise. In his bright gaze, she saw herself reflected, worthy of love. The room held its breath as she hugged him fiercely, burying her face in his hair. Each heartbeat felt like a drum announcing her return. A pack transformed. Josh placed the final relic, a delicate silver locket, around her neck. "This held your parents' ashes. We thought you might never wear it again." Skylar's tears fell onto Damian's boots as she fastened the clasp. In that instant, she was no longer the orphaned slave of her past pack, nor the fractured memory of a runaway. She was whole. Promises made in moonlight. As twilight descended, Damian drew Skylar to the window. Outside, the moonbeam pack gathered, in silent vigil beneath a rising moon. Their silhouettes were a promise, a family unbroken by secrets and pain. Damian murmured, "From now on, every memory, good or bad, will be shared, not hidden." Skylar rested her head on his shoulder, chest swelling with renewed purpose. The dawn of remembrance. When she finally stepped from the study, the hall was alight with welcoming smiles. Whispers of Skylar passed from lips to lips. No longer a foreign echo, but her true name, reclaimed. Each pack member bowed respectfully, and Skylar returned their greeting with a radiant smile. She had navigated the labyrinth of lost memories and emerged, stronger for every scar and every secret revealed. Hope rekindled. In the circle of her pack, old and new, Skylar raised her face to the moonlit night. The wind stirred her hair, and every leaf in the forest seemed to whisper her story. A tale of erasure and recovery, of betrayal and unwavering loyalty, of a girl named Skylar, who would never again be lost to herself. And as Timothy's small, Voice echoed once more. Sky. She closed her eyes and let history settle into her bones, a foundation for the future she would build at last. Section title: Training and Bonding. Dawn broke in pale gold over the Moonbeam Pack's training grounds, turning dew-slick grass into a carpet of diamonds. Skylar laced her boots, heart pounding with anticipation. Around her, Damian, Josh, Daniel, and Jacob gathered in loose formation, their breaths rising in visible puffs. Today wasn't just another practice. It was the day Skylar would measure herself against the pack, prove that she belonged. The sprint through silvered pines. With a low howl from Damian, the pack burst into motion. Skylar surged forward, legs pumping as she wove between ancient pines. Branches slapped her hoodie, birds scattered in startled flight. Josh and Daniel tore alongside, throwing over-the-shoulder grins of encouragement. Damian's powerful stride soon pulled him ahead, but Skylar didn't relent, each step a declaration that she was no longer the trembling girl in the corner of the pack house kitchen. She was a warrior in the making. Obstacle course of E. Shadows. No sooner had they circled back than Jacob laid down the challenge. A tangle of cargo nets and log hurdles, damp from the morning mist. Skylar launched herself over the first hurdle, leather soles thudding against soaked wood. Below, Timothy, newly shifted pup wolf, watched with wide eyes and cheered. "Go, Sky!" he called. Skylar smiled, warm and fierce, before vaulting into the cargo net. Every muscle quivered with effort, but when she dropped down on the other side, breath ragged, her grin was triumphant. Sparring under the amber sun. Next came partner drills, padded shields, and lightweight batons. Damian squared off with Skylar first, a deliberate move to show her how to match alpha strength with technique. Their clash was a study in controlled power. His gloved palm pressed into her shoulder, then spun into a feint, testing her stance. Skylar pivoted on her heel, blocked, and delivered a precise tap at his ribs. "Nice," Damian growled, stepping back. "You're learning faster than any beta I've seen." Pride rolled through her chest like wildfire. Cust, banter, and brotherhood. Between circuits, the pack shared water and laughter. Daniel teased Skylar about her dramatic battle cry, while Josh challenged her to outdo his push-up record. On the grass, Skylar dropped and powered through 50, then 50 more, as Damian timed her with a raised eyebrow. When she hit 110, her arms shook, but she lifted her chin. "Record's mine now," she panted. Daniel high-fived her, and the pack roared approval. In that moment, Skylar felt the embrace of belonging tighten around her like a second skin. B. The push-up gauntlet. Not content with a single victory, Josh orchestrated a gauntlet. Each member added 10 push-ups in turn. One by one, Damian, Daniel, Jacob, and Josh dropped to the earth, straining through their sets. When it reached Skylar, she counted aloud, 1, 2, each number a heartbeat of confidence. At 200 total, her arms trembled like birch leaves in a storm. She held the plank for a final silent beat, then collapsed onto her side, laughing. Timothy scampered forward to slap her back, giggling at the spectacle. Hidden strengths. Revealed. As the sun topped the treetops, Skylar cooled down beside the river, dipping her feet in the rushing water. Jacob handed her a towel. He nodded toward her bruised ribs, fading purple against pale skin, and said quietly, "You're tougher than you know." Skylar traced the healing lines with her fingertip. "Thanks," she replied, voice soft, "for not letting me quit." The pack's unity, born of respect and shared struggle, had refortified her spirit more surely than any memory. Bonds forged in sweat. Under the shade of a willow, Damian offered Skylar his water bottle. She raised it in salute, meeting his gaze. No alpha over subordinate, but two wolves side by side. He spoke softly. You've earned your place. Tomorrow. Something tells me you'll need every ounce of this strength. His words hovered between them, heavy with promise and challenge. Skylar accepted the offer, feeling the weight of responsibility ignite a fierce joy in her chest. The calm before transformation. As the pack gathered their gear, Timothy padded up to Skylar's side, eyes bright. Ready for tonight? He whispered, leaning close. Skylar knelt to hug him, chin brushing his tousled hair. I think so, she murmured, though her pulse thrummed like a drum. The air around them seemed to hush, as if the forest itself awaited what was coming. Beneath her ribs, an echo of anticipation pulsed. Her first wolf shift, a rite of pain and rebirth, loomed just beyond the horizon. Micro cliffhanger, the edge of change. Skylar straightened, gaze fixed on the distant tree line where moonlight would soon carve silver pathways. Muscles still humming, heart still racing, she inhaled the earthy scent of moss and promise. Tomorrow, she would become more than herself. Tomorrow, she would roar. And in that awakening, everything would change. Section title: Foundling Fate. A hush fell over the Moonbeam Pack's forest edge as Sunday's golden light filtered through the canopy. Skylar walked barefoot beside Timothy, the little wolf cub skipping ahead to chase drifting dandelion seeds. The morning air was scented with pine and promise, until a soft, desperate cry cut through the stillness. Did you hear that? Skylar whispered, pressing a finger to her lips. Timmy froze, ears tipping forward. They followed the sound into a thicket, branches snagging Skylar's hoodie. Beyond the underbrush, cradled in a mossy hollow, lay a small carry case. And inside, a newborn baby, swaddled in blankets, blinked up at them with astonished eyes. He stirred, arms curled tight, and let out a wail that cracked Skylar's heart in two. Oh my God. Skylar knelt, voice trembling. Timmy reached out a tentative hand. The infant curled into his palm. Skylar swept back her hood, gently gathering him into her arms. He was slight as a sparrow, his skin pink and perfect. Yet bloodshot from tears, he trembled. At her hip, Skylar discovered a folded envelope tied to the handle with a single ribbon. With unsteady fingers, she broke the seal. Timmy watched, eyes wide, as she unfolded the letter. Dear whoever is reading this, if you have found my son Xander, then you have saved him from a fate I cannot bear to provide. I am a lone wolf, destined for a solitary path, and I cannot bring him with me. Inside this case you will find his birth certificate, a small gift of, you will understand soon. I have enclosed enough money for essentials. Please care for him as your own. Xander's future lies not in loneliness, but in the embrace of a pack. If you could grant him that life, I will always be grateful. Amy. Skylar's eyes blurred. He's 3 months old. Her voice cracked. She left him to save him. Timmy pressed closer, soft sobs racking his frame. Poor baby, he whispered, stroking the fur blanket. Skylar wrapped the infant tighter, pressing his cheek to her heart. Farther back, Damian, Josh, Daniel, and Jacob, on their usual patrol, had heard the cries. Emerging from the pines, they froze at the sight. Skylar, arms full of a newborn, and little Timmy, brave and trembling beside her. What? Josh stammered. Daniel knelt at Skylar's side, forehead furrowed. Is that a baby? Jacob's voice was a low gasp. Damian hurried forward, every alpha instinct alight. He took in the scene. The moss-stained case, the letter in Skylar's hand, her pale, haunted eyes. Skylar looked up. Damian. We found him, she said, voice thick with wonder and dread. Amy left him in the woods. She wanted him to have a pack. Damian reached out, gently lifting the baby into his own arms. Xander's small fists curled against Damian's chest. His cry faded into curious coos. Damian glanced at the letter, read it once, twice, eyes darkening with empathy. She entrusted him to us, Damian murmured. Around them, the pack gathered. In a wide circle, mothers and fathers, elders and pups, each inhaling the baby's faint, clean scent. Compassion bloomed like moonflowers in every heart. Daniel whispered, voice hushed. We can't leave him here. Josh nodded. He's too young, too innocent. Jacob's hand slid to Skylar's shoulder. Come on, let's get him home. As Skylar followed Damian back to the pack house, the forest seemed to hold its breath. The elders fell into a silent procession behind them, each step pregnant with unspoken questions. Inside the great hall, Damian cradled Xander before the assembled pack. Skylar placed the letter on the long wooden table, next to a small bowl of water. One by one, wolves, shifted and human, approached to glimpse the baby, their eyes soft with awe. Carol, mother to young Timothy, knelt and murmured, He's beautiful. Jacob leaned close. What shall we do? Damian cleared his throat, lifting his gaze. He's as much a part of our pack as any pup born under our moon. Then came a tremor of anticipation. In the dim lantern light, an elder, silver-haired and wise, took the letter and read the closing words aloud. Grant him the life of a pack. Silence stretched. From a distant corner, a soft voice, trembling like a leaf in wind, whispered, Prophecy. Another voice joined. One in a blue moon. Soon, the ancient legend surfaced among the pack, that when a boy and girl, separated by 3 years and bound by fate, would emerge together to lead, the future king and queen of wolves. Eyes turned to Skylar, still holding Timmy, and then to Xander, swaddled in Damian's arms. The hall buzzed. Astonishment, hope, wonder. A future once hidden in whispers seemed poised to unfold in this foundling child. Damian set Xander in Skylar's arms. His name, he said gently, is Xander Mark. He belongs to you now, and to us all. Skylar's eyes filled with tears as she kissed Xander's forehead. From every corner, the pack offered soft laughter, tears, and whispered prayers. In that moment, the Moonbeam Pack was more than a family. It was the cradle of destiny, warmed by the fragile life in Skylar's arms. And as the prophecy's echo rippled through the hall, every wolf felt it. This foundling fate had bound them together, forever. Section title, Adopting the Future. King. The great hall of the Moonbeam Pack trembled with hushed voices as Damian lifted a simple wooden staff carved with lunar runes. Lanterns cast dancing shadows on the walls, and the gathered wolves, shifted and unshifted, fell silent. At the center of the room stood Skylar, arms trembling, cradling baby Xander. Around her, the pack's council formed a circle of watchful faces. Elders with silvered hair, mothers with fierce eyes, and young warriors broad-shouldered with curiosity. Damian's voice rang out, steady and low. We have found this child on our land, left with no mother, no family but us. A promise, written by a lone wolf, asked that he be raised in a pack. Tonight we decide, who among us will claim the honor and burden of Xander's care? A murmur rippled through the assembly. Carol, gentle guardian of young Timothy, stepped forward. He is so small, she said, voice soft. He needs a mother's warmth, a father's strength. She glanced at Skylar. Perhaps Skylar. Before she could finish, Daniel's deep voice rumbled. Skylar found him. She bore him in, her arms through the forest. She has already shown courage. We owe her first consideration. Heads nodded in agreement. Josh cleared his throat. This is not about convenience. Xander needs stability. Home, food, lessons, training. Who can give him that? He turned to Skylar, eyes kind but probing. Are you certain you want this responsibility? Silence fell. Skylar's heart pounded. All eyes seemed to burn her skin. She looked down at the baby's sleeping form, chest rising and falling like a fragile heartbeat. Memories of her own childhood, torn between loss and longing, flashed in her mind. Now, here was another child, voiceless yet depending on her. With trembling breath, she lifted her head. "I want it," she whispered. Her voice gained strength. "I'll raise him." Murmurs rose among the council. Surprise, admiration, relief. She continued, gaze unwavering. "I know what it is to be alone. I know what it feels like to have no one to fight for you. Xander will never be abandoned. Not while I live." Tears gathered, catching the lantern light. Daniel placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. Damian's icy blue eyes softened. "You volunteer for motherhood," Damian spoke, voice hushed. "Do you understand the nights without sleep? The fear? The constant watchfulness?" Skylar nodded, firm. "Every moment, I will learn. I will grow. He will never again know hunger or cold, or loneliness." From the shadows, an elder named Mara stepped forward. Her voice, though aged, held unexpected warmth. "A mother's heart," she said, addressing the pack. "Is this not what we all seek? To protect the innocent? Skylar stands before us, offering her life for his." She paused, letting her words sink in. "What say you, my pack?" A roar of assent shook the room. Mothers, fathers, warriors, all pledging their support. Carol rushed forward, placing her hand over Skylar's. "You will not stand alone," she promised. Josh and Daniel flanked Skylar, their presence a shield. In the flickering light, unity coalesced. Damian crossed the circle and knelt beside Skylar. "Then it is decided. Xander Mark shall be your son, and you shall be his mother." He bowed his head, and Skylar bowed in return. As she rose, Damian offered his hand, a silent covenant. Skylar grasped it, and a soft pulse of light seemed to flicker between them, as though the moon itself bore witness. He spoke the ancient words of adoption, old word tongue ringing with power. "By moon and blood, by pack and promise, we bind this child to hearth and home. Mother and father, united we stand, guardians of this future king." Each word echoed in the hall, settling like stardust on every heart. Skylar's eyes glistened with awe and gratitude. She turned to cradle Xander, pressing her cheek to his. The baby stirred, a tiny hand curling around her finger. A soft sigh passed through the pack, an exhalation of relief and hope. The future king was claimed, his fate entwined with the Moonbeam pack. Around Skylar the circle closed, voices lifted in a gentle, welcoming chant, each syllable a promise. Home, hearth, heart. We raise him with care. Moonlight, blood, bond. Our strength shall be there. Damian rose, placing a protective arm around Skylar's shoulders. She rested her head against his side, feeling the steady beat of his heart. In that moment, the last fragments of her own loneliness melted away, replaced by purpose and belonging. "Welcome, Xander," Damian whispered, voice thick with emotion. "You have a mother who loves you, and a pack to guide you." Skylar smiled up at him, tears spilling freely now. Together, they looked down at their son, united in a bond forged by compassion, destiny, and the silent vow of the moon. The Moonbeam pack, once fractured by secrets and pain, now stood united. In the warmth of this hall, Skylar's maternal heart blazed bright, and a new chapter began. One of protection, love, and the promise that the future king would know nothing but the strength of his family and pack. Section. Title: Return to Moonbeam Territory. The road stretched out before them like a silver ribbon under an early morning sky. Skylar sat in the back seat of Carol's SUV, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the leather upholstery. Beside her, little Timothy chattered about butterflies and creek jumping, his youthful energy a stark contrast to her own tight-knuckled tension. Carol glanced in the rearview mirror, offering Skylar a gentle smile. "Almost time," she murmured. Skylar drew a slow breath. The border of Moonbeam territory lay just beyond the next rise, where, 3 years ago, she had fled from rejection, bruised and broken. Now she was returning, not as a frightened outcast, but as a mother and warrior, her steps bolstered by a new purpose. Yet the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. A half-mile marker appeared, a weathered stone sign carved with the pack's emblem, a full moon cradling a wolf's head. Skylar's pulse quickened. She glanced at Carol and Timothy, who both offered encouraging grins. "We've got your back," Carol said softly. Timothy waved, grinning so fiercely his freckles danced. Skylar managed a shaky smile in return. Montage. Glam makeover sequence. The scene shifted to Carol's spare bedroom, bathed in warm lamplight. Skylar stood before a mirrored vanity, her hair undone from the night's rest. Carol and Timothy directed a rapid-fire makeover, foundation gently buffed into her cheeks to mask the last shadows of exhaustion. A sweep of rose-gold eyeshadow that made her green eyes glow, a touch of mascara to frame each lash, and a soft mauve lipstick that pressed strength into her smile. Carol braided Skylar's fiery hair into a loose, elegant crown, tucking stray strands behind her ears. Timothy offered finishing touches, a single wildflower pinned behind her right ear, stolen from the garden outside. Skylar inhaled the floral scent, letting it anchor her resolve. The glimmering cloak Damian had gifted her, silver-edged and full length, slid smoothly over her shoulders, a protective moonlight armor. They stepped back. Skylar's reflection showed no trace of the scared girl who once cowered at these borders. Instead, she looked every inch a woman reborn, regal, unafraid, ready to face whatever awaited inside. Carol squeezed her hand. "Let's go home." And journey over the ridge. The sun had climbed higher by the time they crested the ridge. Beyond it lay the moonlit forest that led down to the pack's grand stone manor. Tall pines filtered shafts of sunlight, and the scent of moss and pine needles was both familiar and foreign. Skylar pressed her palm to the car window, feeling a tug in her chest, part dread, part longing. "Remember," Carol said, her voice firm yet kind, "you're not alone. You've got Tim and me. And everyone in that house will see you for who you are now, strong, brave, and caring." Timothy nodded, bouncing in his seat. Skylar swallowed past the lump in her throat and nodded back, steel weaving through her spine. The SUV rumbled down the winding lane. Fallen leaves scuttled like golden sparks across the road. Wildflowers nodded as they passed. Birds flitted overhead. Each heartbeat carried Skylar closer to the pack house and to the pack itself. Approaching the gates. At the forest's edge, twin stone pillars loomed, guardians of a legacy. The wrought iron gates, wrought with conquerors' scars and moon-emblazoned filigree, stood open but imposing. As the car rolled through, Skylar's breath caught. Memories of laughter, whispers, and cruelty tangled in her mind. But beneath them, a steady current of hope pulsed. Here she had found family in Damian, purpose in motherhood, and a pack united behind her. Carol guided the SUV along the cobblestone drive. Timothy pressed his face to the glass, wide-eyed at the sight of the manor's high windows and flickering lanterns inside. Skylar felt the air grow heavier with expectation. She exhaled, straightened her shoulders, and looked at her reflection. In the window, determined eyes, set jaw, cloak, billowing like captured moonlight. The cliffhanger at the doorstep. The SUV came to a halt in front of the grand oak doors. Hands carved with lunar runes curled protectively around the handles. Beyond them, the warm glow of candlelight hinted at faces turned toward the entrance. Curious, hopeful, perhaps wary. Skylar's heart thundered in her ears. Carol reached across and squeezed Skylar's hand one last time. "This is your moment," she whispered. Timothy climbed onto Skylar's lap, wrapping his small arms around her waist. "You got this, Sky." Skylar climbed out into the soft gravel, the cloak's hem whispering underfoot. She inhaled the crisp forest air, tasting pine and promise. With Carol at her side and Timothy clinging to her, she stepped forward. Each footfall echoed through the quiet courtyard. Skylar paused before the doors. Her hand hovered over the carved wood, fingers trembling with the weight of the next act. She closed her eyes for a heartbeat, collecting courage, summoning every lesson learned on her journey, and then lifted her hand, ready to knock. Behind those doors lay her past, her future, and the pack she would stand with or fall before. The night breeze stirred, lifting a stray wisp of hair across her forehead as she brought her fist down. The sound of wood meeting knuckles rang out like a bell in a cathedral of shadows. Skylar's eyes snapped open. The world held its breath. 2. Be continued. Section. Title: Defiant Reunion. Sunlight streamed through the grand windows of the Moonbeam Packhouse's entry hall, gilding every speck of dust in the air. Skylar paused at the threshold, Carol's steady hand on her shoulder. Timothy's, small fingers curled in her palm. But it wasn't the old fear that froze her heart. It was anticipation, crackling like electricity in her veins. Today she would face them all, her brother Jace, and the pack who once tormented her. The heavy oak doors swung open on silent hinges. A dozen pairs of eyes turned, some wide with surprise, others cast in wary suspicion. Jace stood at the top of the marble steps, arms folded, a practiced smirk tugging his lips. His hair was shorter, his jaw more defined, but those same storm-gray eyes locked on Skylar with a bolt of recognition that sent a jolt through her. "Hey, sis." His voice was low, teasing, but behind it lay something else. Awe. Skylar stepped forward, chin high. "Morning, big brother." Her words came crisp, unbroken by the tremor she felt inside. Timothy scampered past her, giggling as he darted toward Jace's legs. Carol followed, offering Skylar a nod of encouragement. Without warning, Jace lunged, arms swinging in playful challenge, and knocked Timothy lightly aside. Timothy squealed in delight. Skylar barely had time to brace herself before Jace's fist tapped her shoulder in a mock jab. "You look different," he said, feigning a blow to her bicep. Skylar feigned a gasp. "Oh, so now you notice?" She ducked under his neck swipe and delivered a gentle but firm shoulder check. The two collided in a tangle of limbs, wrestling each other onto a Persian rug faded with foot traffic. Gasps echoed around the hall as the pack watched their former meek sister flip her brother deftly onto his back. For the first time in years, Skylar laughed, a rich, ringing sound that filled the hall. Jace's laughter followed, wetter, darker, but genuine. He sprang to his feet, and she met him in one smooth motion, her cloak swirling like captured moonlight. Around them, pack members exchanged startled glances. This was not the frightened girl who once cowered in the kitchen corner. This was a woman transformed. "Not bad," Jace admitted, rubbing his shoulder where Skylar had playfully slammed. "Him. You've been Training with Damian, I take it? Skylar straightened the silver-edged cloak he had gifted her. You could say that. Timothy raced back, clambered onto Jace's knee, and pointed at Skylar's knuckles. She's strong like Mommy, he announced. Skylar crouched to ruffle his hair, and just as fierce, a ripple of murmurs ran through the assembled pack. Some faces were alight with admiration, others clouded by shame. They had stood by while Skylar's strength was buried beneath their cruelty, and now they watched her reclaim it, bone and soul. Jace caught Skylar's eye and gave a slight nod. His expression softened, the playful spark turning to genuine pride. You're not the same little sister who ran away, he said, voice low enough that only Skylar could hear. You're better. Skylar's chest tightened. She let Jace's words sink in, then threw him a challenging grin. Think you can keep up? She circled him, hands on hips. Or have you forgotten how to spar with me? He rose to his feet. Oh, I remember. And with that, they launched into a teasing spar, turning cartwheels across marble, trading light taps that sounded like drum beats in the hush, each move punctuated by Skylar's bright laughter and Jace's ragged breath. Around them, the pack watched their siblings duel spellbound. Even Alpha Xavier, standing at the edge of the hall, allowed himself a small, rare smile. Here, in Skylar's defiance, was proof of her resilience and a warning of her power. At last, Skylar fainted, then swept Jace's legs from under him. He landed on his back with a soft thud. Skylar offered a mock bow. Victory is mine. Jace lay there for a heartbeat, then looked up at her, breathless, and cracked a grin. I surrender to my champion sister. Skylar extended a hand. Jace accepted it, pulling himself up. They stood close, shoulder to shoulder, facing the pack together. In that moment, they were united, siblings bound by survival, by shared pain, and now by a new strength. Carol shuffled forward, clearing her throat. Dinner in an hour, she announced. All pack members are expected to attend. She cast Skylar a proud look. We'll sit together. A hush fell. No one dared challenge Carol's authority. Skylar's presence, so boldly reintroduced, had shifted the pack's balance. Whispers stirred at the edges. Who was this woman who wrestled her brother and commanded respect? Jace laid a protective hand on Skylar's shoulder. His gaze swept the crowd. This is my sister, he announced, loud enough for every heart in the hall to hear. And she's here to stay. Skylar felt a heat rise through her. Pride, relief, anticipation. The playful fight with Jace had revealed how far she'd come, but it also teased darker battles ahead. The moment of reckoning loomed. Those who had scorned her would soon learn that the girl they rejected had returned not to cower, but to conquer. As they moved toward the grand dining hall, side by side, Skylar heard the soft pad of Damian's footsteps behind her. His presence was a steady beacon. Together, with brother at her right, mate at her left, she stepped into the next chapter of her fate, and the pack watched in stunned silence, uncertain whether to bow or flee. But one thing was clear. Skylar was no longer the rejected alpha. She was the defiant one, and the moonlit pack house trembled in her wake. Section title, Brothers' Redemption. The lanterns in the grand dining hall flickered as the last echoes of applause faded. Plates had been cleared, and a hush settled over the assembled pack. Skylar sat at the head of the long oak table, her posture regal, but her eyes weary from the morning's whirlwind of reunions. Across from her, Jace hovered by an empty chair. His shoulders hunched, his gaze fixed on the scarred wood beneath his fingertips. In that charged silence, the weight of years pressed down on them both. Jace drew in a trembling breath. Moonlight, spilled through the stained glass windows, catching the silver streaks in his hair. "Sky," he began, voice raw. He paused as if the words might shatter in the stillness. Skylar's heart thudded, a storm of many yesterdays rising in her chest. She lifted her gaze, steeling herself to listen. "I have nothing to offer that can undo what I did," Jace continued, his voice breaking on a sigh. "But I can't live knowing I drove you to the edge. Every bruise, every broken promise. I was the one who taught the pack to hate you." He bowed forward, tears glinting on his lashes. "I thought I was protecting our family's honor. I thought I was strong. Instead, I was cruel." Skylar's breath caught. She remembered the searing pain of that rejection. The cold snap of jaws closing on her ribs, the silent gasps of the pack as her spirit cracked. Yet here sat Jace, bone-deep remorse etched into every line of his face. The table's lantern light flickered again, illuminating his sorrow as though granting it absolution. Jace's head lifted slowly. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "My sister, the one I vowed to shield. I abandoned you. If you can ever forgive me, truly forgive me, I will spend my life making amends." His plea hung between them, fragile as breath on glass. Skylar closed her eyes. Memories clashed, her mother's lullabies, her father's warm laughter, and then the brutal mornings of scorn and solitude. Yet beneath the scars lay a deeper ember, the bond of blood unbroken by hatred. She inhaled, letting the scent of burning candles seep into her bones, anchoring her. When she spoke, her voice had the calm authority of a pack alpha. "Jace," she said, "you owe me more than apologies, but I've seen genuine sorrow in your eyes." Their shared childhood, the confessions whispered under oak trees, the scraped knees she'd tended, the secret wishes made on shooting stars, rose like a tide. "I won't pretend the past never happened, nor will I let you erase my scars with words alone." He nodded, tears slipping free. "I understand," he murmured. "I know I have to earn back your trust. Every day." Skylar's gaze softened. She rose and crossed the table, each step echoing in the still hall. When she reached him, she placed a hand on his shoulder, a touch both tentative and powerful. The tremor in her fingertips matched his own. "Here's what I can give you," she said, voice steady. "A chance. I forgive you for trying to break me, but not for forgetting who I truly am. Prove that you remember." She tilted his chin until their eyes met. "Let your actions speak louder than any regret." Jace's posture straightened, relief blooming in his chest. He swallowed, bowed deeply, and then, carefully, enfolded her in a brother's embrace. Skylar's arms circled him in return, years of loneliness melting in that single heartbeat. Around them, pack members gathered at respectful distance, witnessing the redemption unfolding. Carol, standing in the doorway, offered Skylar a proud nod. Timothy tugged Jace's sleeve and peered up with wide, trusting eyes. In that circle of reconnection, Skylar felt her own power shift, from the lonely rejection of the past to the possibility of a united future. Breaking the hug, Skylar gave Jace a gentle smile, one that acknowledged both pain and hope. "We'll take it one step at a time," she promised, "but steps we will take, together." Jace exhaled, the tension draining from his shoulders. "Together," he echoed. And in that single word, the seeds of real reconciliation took root. Fragile, uncertain, but charged with the promise of healing. As they returned to their places at the table, the lantern light seemed to burn brighter, illuminating a path forward. Skylar tucked her hand into Jace's, a silent vow shared between siblings, that blood could bind them beyond the wounds of yesterday. guiding them toward the family they were always meant to be. Section title: Drums of War. A low rumble of hooves echoed beneath the moonlit sky as Damian's pack assembled in the ancient war hall. The cavernous chamber, once used for seasonal rites, now thrummed with restless energy. Flint torches cast dancing shadows on carved stone walls, where ancestral banners bore witness to generations of wolf-born defenders. At the center, a long oaken table groaned under war maps, parchment sealed with crimson wax, and rows of sharpened blades that glittered like captured starlight. Damian stood at the head of the table, cloak clasped at his throat, his steely gaze reaching into every corner of the hall. Beside him, his beta, Josh, leaned forward, fingers drumming a staccato rhythm on the table's edge. Across the room, Daniel and Jacob tightened straps on their vambraces, their faces resolute. Every member of the Moonbeam pack was present. Seasoned warriors in leather, young recruits with hunting knives at their belts, and elders whose eyes held the gravity of centuries. A hush fell as Damian raised a hand. The flickering flames stilled, and even the hearth's crackle seemed to pause. "Pack," he began, voice low but carrying the weight of command. "The Wolf King's decree has reached us at dawn." His words dropped like iron into the stillness. Gasps rippled through the assembly. He swept his arm toward the maps. 2 territories, ours and the Thornclaw domain, are on a collision course. Both packs have been ordered to train the Thornclaws for war, though neither of us chose this conflict. His knuckles whitened on the table's edge. Our border meadows and sacred glades lie between them. The king demands resolution. Whichever pack stands victorious at sunset must claim the disputed land as its own. Murmurs spread. Questions, fears, anger. A young warrior spoke out, voice shaking. "Damian, they've corrupted our traditions, forcing us to arm both sides?" He glanced at the map, where red lines marked Thornclaw positions. "We teach them our fiercest tactics, only to face them at dawn?" Damian's gaze hardened. "It is the Wolf King's will. We cannot defy him, but we can ensure our pack emerges unbroken." He tapped a location on the map. "Here, amid the willow marsh, they will make their stand. We will be ready." Josh leaned in, unsealing a scroll. "Our scouts report the Thornclaws have been training since last moon. They've mastered ambush drills, spear formations, and nightly raids. If we underestimate them, we risk everything." Daniel nodded grimly. "We've matched every lesson they learned. Swordsmanship at first light, spear throwing at dusk, wolf form endurance tests beneath the stars. Each of us has drilled, side by side with our would-be enemies, only to sharpen ourselves against them once more." Jacob's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Tonight, we launch our final exercise. Every pack member will rotate through live drills. Defender, attacker, rescuer. The Thornclaws have done the same. Come dawn, our muscles will remember every parry, every block, every powerful surge." A hush fell again, heavier this time, and Gibai, unspoken understanding that trial by fire awaited them all. Skylar, seated among the younger wolves, poised on the edge of her seat, felt adrenaline pulse in her veins. She glanced at Damian. His stern profile softened for a moment, as he caught her eye, nodding in silent solidarity. Damian lifted a ceremonial drumstick and rapped sharply on a massive bronze drum at the hall's entrance. The deep thump resonated through every bone, stirring every heart. "Drums of war," he intoned. "Let the rhythm of battle ignite our spirits and steel our souls. Tonight, we prepare. Tomorrow, we fight." Immediately, drums answered from deeper within the stronghold. Wooden bass drums, iron-rimmed snares, hollow logs struck with bone mallets. The beat grew, a tribal pulse that shook dust from rafters. Warriors took up drums of their own, hidden among their gear, Each pack member pounded in unison. Torchlight rippled across armored shoulders as they moved in martial cadence, forging unity. Damian called out commands, footwork patterns, shield walls, flank maneuvers, each echoed by the pack in rising unison. Skylar found herself at the front line, feet planted firm, counting each beat as she lunged, feinted, blocked. The clang of steel rang out in time with heartbeat and drum, forging a ritual of preparation. Outside the hall, the moon hovered indifferently above pines that stood sentinel over the marshlands. Wolves patrolled the perimeter, ears pricked for intruders. In the distance, the Thornclaw's own drumbeats matched the Moonbeam Pack's cadence, a harbinger of the confrontation that would dawn with the sun. As the night deepened, training intensified. Bruised arms and winded lungs testified to every grappling match. Swords bit leather, shields splintered wood, and alliances formed in the heat of sparring. Damian moved among his pack like a conductor, guiding crescendos of exertion and silence between rounds of deadly calm. Finally, at the 9th toll of the bell tower, the drums fell silent. The warriors stood, heaving breaths misting in the cool air. Damian gathered them once more by the central table. Shadows carved deep lines into his face. "Tomorrow," he said slowly, "we face what we have trained for. Remember, our people, our land, and our honor depend on every strike you deliver, every shield you raise, and every breath you take." He raised his arm to the ceiling. "By the Wolf King's command, we prepare to defend Moonbeam territory, our home, our legacy. Rest now, for at dawn, the drums will sound again, and we will answer." The pack fell silent, eyes aflame with resolve. One after another they clasped hands, forming an unbroken circle of unity. Skylar felt the energy surge through her. Fear, pride, determination, molding her into the warrior she had become. As she stepped into the corridor's torchlit shadows, she heard the distant echo of 2 drumming voices, her own pack answering, the call and the Thornclaws poised for war. Above them all, the Wolf King's decree lingered like a storm cloud, victory or ruin by sunset's light. And with that, the drums of war had begun. Section title: Skylar's Premonition. A cool dawn mist curled around the marshland's edge as Skylar stepped onto the wooden platform that overlooked the battlefield. Her heart throbbed in rhythm with the lingering drum beats from last night's war hall, residual echoes that whispered of inevitabilities yet to unfold. The horizon, painted in bruised purples and grays, bore the distant silhouettes of Thornclaw sentries, like shadow warriors poised on the brink of flame. Every nerve in Skylar's body crackled with anticipation, yet beneath that charge lay something deeper, a tight, tremulous thread of dread woven through her blood. Skylar drew a breath, tasting cold dew on her tongue, the wide expanse before her, the knot of wetlands, the reed-lined lakeshore, felt alive, pulsing with unseen forces. She closed her eyes and let her senses extend beyond her mortal skin. Faint ripples of wolf-born energy, the faint stir of ancient spirit beneath, the reeds, the metal-sharp promise of danger in the air. In that moment, time slowed. "The world has changed," her inner voice murmured, low and urgent. "This will not be a battle of claws and steel alone." A soft tug at her sleeve drew her attention. Timothy stood at her side, his small frame dwarfed by the looming platform's rail. The boy's bright eyes, still speckled with the innocence of childhood, held an uncanny gravity. He leaned close and whispered, "Sky." His voice trembled, but his words rang clear. "I see fire on the water, and the reeds bleeding red." Skylar's breath caught. She reached down, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "What do you mean, Tim?" she asked, gently masking her own shock. The boy's lip quivered, and he lifted his hand to point toward the misty expanse. "The water's on fire. The battle will come through the reeds like a wave of sparks, and someone will fall, leaving a trail of blood behind. A shiver slithered down her spine. Timothy, at 7 years old, should not glimpse such horrors. Yet she remembered the day he had first called her Sky, like a true mate, like a beacon in the dark. In him, she felt a well of ancient wisdom, stirring. Skylar swallowed hard, nodding. "Then we must be ready, little wolf." She bent to press a kiss to his temple, feeling his racing heartbeat beneath her palm. Behind them, the pack's ranks shifted. Damian, statuesque and resolute. Josh, Daniel, and Jacob, checking their weapons with steady focus. But Skylar's gaze returned to Timothy's words. The battlefield was more than a contest of strength. It was steeped in omen and fate. The very land would remember this day. Feeling the weight of prophecy. Skylar closed her eyes again, summoning the wolf beneath her skin. A pulse of fur tingle ran along her spine, and her senses expanded further. The distant flash of metal in the marsh. The low animal hum of thornclaw wolves massing. The faint murmur of reeds against wind. Far off, a heron took flight, shrieking as if alarmed. She glimpsed a flicker of motion. 2 figures moving through the mist, their shapes blurred between human and wolf. Her pulse quickened. "They're scouting," she murmured. "Damian!" She turned and shouted, "Hold positions! Wait for my signal!" Her command snapped the pack to attention. Horses whinnied behind them, pack riders urging. Mounts into formation. Spears and swords caught stray rays of rising sun, turning steel into 1,000 scintillas. Still, Skylar stood at the edge, Timothy clasped to her hip like an ember in her arms. Her inner voice whispered again, low and urgent. "Trust the wolf within. Trust your pack. Trust the spark in that boy's words." The reeds behind her rustled, as if a dark tide were advancing, a tide of threat laced with inevitability. Moments stretched taut. Then she sensed it, a shift in the wind that carried the metallic tang of spilled blood. A single black crow wheeled overhead, cawing thrice. Timothy's grip tightened on her cloak. "It's starting," he said. Skylar dropped to one knee, gathering him closer. "Your eyes see truth, little one. Remember it." She rose, hefted her sword, and turned to face her pack. "Moonbeam pack. Today the Wolf King tests us all, but do not fight for command, nor for conquest. Fight for each other, for the land that nurtures us, and for the future we choose to build." A thunderous howl rose in answer, as if the very earth joined their vow. Damian echoed her sentiment. "We go together. No one stands alone." His hand went to Skylar's shoulder in a rare gesture of solidarity. Though words went unsaid, an unbreakable alliance passed between them. Skylar gazed again at the reeds, now parting to admit shadowy shapes on the far bank. In the haze, she sensed something more, a yearning energy that defied mere survival. It was as if the marsh itself would judge this day and claim its price. She inhaled the damp air, letting Timothy breathe in her neck. In that moment, she felt every heartbeat in her pack, every heartbeat in the land, and every heartbeat in her own chest merge into one definitive drum. Then the hunter's cry rang out, sharp, triumphant, and terrible. The Thornclaw scouts had crossed the line. Skylar lifted her sword in salute to dawn, her voice rising above the wind. For Moonbeam. The standard-bearers unfurled sapphire banners, and the full tide of pack energy surged forward. As Skylar took her first stride into the mist-shrouded reeds, Timothy clutched her cloak and whispered, "I'm not afraid. Fire can be born from courage." She smiled, fierce and determined. "Then, let us be the spark that lights the new world." And together, wolf and pack, they plunged into the dawn of war. Guided by courage, bound by prophecy, and fueled by every whisper of Skylar's premonition. Section title: Clash of Pack Alphas. The first pale rays of dawn split the horizon as both packs assembled on opposite banks of the shattered marshland. Mist curled around twisted reeds. The air thrummed with tension. Moonbeam warriors, muscles, coiled like springs, met Thornclaw sentinels whose yellow eyes glowed through the haze. No words were spoken. Only the rising sun and the hush before the storm. An ear-splitting wolf call tore the silence. From Moonbeam's flank, Alpha Xavier launched himself forward, massive form shifting mid-stride from man to wolf. His coat rippled silver in the pale light. From Thornclaw's side, the rival Alpha answered with a deep-throated roar, fur bristling black as midnight. In that instant, dawn ignited into war. Steel kissed leather as pack warriors collided. Spears splintered, claws shredded mail, and the ground shook beneath pounding paws. Blood bloomed on fur-spattered furrows, red as wildfire across the sodden earth. Howls rose in savage harmony. Moonbeam's defiant cry met Thornclaw's guttural challenge. Each side surged, ebbing like tides of fury. Skylar watched from a rise, breath caught in her throat. Timothy clung to her leg, pale dawn light illuminating, his wide eyes. Beside her, Damian rallied stragglers, wolves and humans united, pushing them back into the fray. In the distance, arrows whistled overhead, finding flesh, felling warrior after warrior. Skylar pressed a hand to her lips, heart pounding in her ears. At midday, the battlefield was an upheaval of motion. Snarling wolves leapt across shattered wagons. Humans wept to see brothers fallen. The marshland's water ran crimson, bleeding, downward toward reeds that writhed with every tremor of violence. Above all, two titans circled one another, Xavier and his nemesis, locked in a dance older than time. The rival Alpha struck first. A savage swipe across Xavier's flank sent spray of hair and blood into the air. Xavier's howl of pain and rage blended into the storm of battle, his teeth bared. He countered with a thunderous slam, knocking the other wolf into a shallow trench. But the black Alpha rolled and sprang free, eyes burning with hate. Xavier staggered back, claws slipping, in mire, but did not yield. He shook his head, muscles rippling beneath torn fur. Then, with a roar that split sky and earth, he charged. The ground trembled under his weight. Each footfall was a war drum, every exhalation a decree of primal power. The world narrowed to the space between them. Around them, packs sensed the climax. Moonbeam warriors pressed forward, Thornclaw backpedaled, sentinels breaking ranks. Skylar felt time slow as she watched her pack's fate hinge on that collision of titans. She closed her eyes, whispering a prayer to the wild spirit that guided them. Guide his fang, steady his heart. Steel-sharp sunlight glinted off Xavier's matted fur as he leapt. Claws tore into the black Alpha's shoulder. The rival snarled, twisting to bite Xavier's hind leg. A geyser of agony rent the air. Two Alpha wolves locked in mortal embrace, bodies tangled in mud and blood. Around them, howls rose and fell like crashing waves. Then came the decisive moment. Xavier felt the world narrow to a single channel of pain and purpose. He reared on hind legs, shaking the other wolf's bulk menace free. Mid-air, Xavier's jaws snapped around the rival's neck with relentless precision. A final, earth-shattering howl echoed across marsh and sky as the black fur went limp. Time fractured. The field stilled. Moonbeam warriors, drenched and panting, froze at the edge of the battle. Thornclaw ranks faltered. The fallen, Alpha's packmates let out a collective whimper. The world seemed to hold its breath as Xavier stood over the fallen foe, chest heaving, crimson muzzle lifted in triumph. With one last towering roar, equal parts triumph and lament, Xavier signaled the end. The surviving Thornclaw howled in surrender, tails tucked, paws trembling. Across the marsh, Moonbeam answered in unified chorus, a single, soaring cry that shook leaves from the reeds and sent ripples across the blood-tinted water. Sunset's orange light cast long shadows of victor and vanquished. Xavier shifted, back to human form, each movement heavy with exhaustion and gravity. He raised clenched fists, meaty, mud-caked, dripping red, to the sky. Behind him, his pack emerged from the mists, battered but unbroken, rallying to his side. Skylar pressed forward, tears streaking dirt across her cheeks. Timothy at her heels, she reached Xavier's side and caught his gaze. The Alpha's silver eyes, once hard as steel, softened with unspoken gratitude. He touched a trembling finger to her forehead, a silent vow that this dawn of victory belonged to every heart that had stood firm. The decisive moment lingered in that final tableau. Alpha Xavier, drenched in the spoils of war, standing tall, amidst the ruin as the sun dipped below the horizon. His roar faded into the coming night, leaving only the steady rhythm of a pack reborn, united by blood, bound by loyalty, and forged in the crucible of their Alpha's triumph. Section Title: Epilogue and Legacies. Sunlight filtered through the ancient oaks of Moonbeam Hollow, painting dappled gold across a tranquil courtyard. The pack house, once echoing with the clang of swords and the roar of battle, now hummed with laughter and soft conversation. A gentle breeze carried the scents of jasmine and pine, scents of home, of hard-won peace. Skylar, now in her early 30s, stood at the heart of that courtyard, holding the smallest hand of all. Her daughter, Marcy, brown-eyed and bright, chattered about school adventures, pulling her mother toward a trio of blooming rose bushes. Beside them, Skylar's arms cradled newborn twins, a boy with Damian's honey-brown hair, and a girl with Skylar's own fiery auburn curls. At her feet, Xander, now 20, stood regal and assured, the future king already learning. Statecraft from Damian. His mate, Sky, radiant in her slender strength, laughed as she steadied her husband's broad shoulders. Time had woven them into an unbreakable tapestry. Once she was the pack's beaten maid. Now she was a mother of 5, a guardian of prophecy, and in her heart, a queen of her own destiny. Across the courtyard, Jace moved with confident grace. The boy who once cowered under his father's lash now strode upright, teaching younger wolves the art of diplomacy. His scarred knuckles, reminders of past cruelty, had become badges of empathy. He paused mid-stride to ruffle son Timothy's creaking hair, sharing a conspiratorial grin. In those lines of Jace's face, you saw the echo of redemption. A brother who fell nearly too far, only to rise stronger, guided by Skylar's forgiveness. And looming over them all, in quiet majesty, was Wiggy, Damian. His broad shoulders bore not just the weight of leadership, but the love of a pack rebuilt. By his side, his mate, Georgia, her pregnant belly now the cradle of another generation, offered him water from a carved silver goblet. Their twins, now toddlers, chased each other in playful circles, under the watchful gaze of a pack that had learned to be a true family. The courtyard gates creaked open at midday, drawing every eye. A procession of wolves, now human by decree, filed in behind Ambassador Thee. Ariel, from the neighboring Riverwind pack. They bore gifts, woven tapestries, of fine silk, crates of ripening fruits, and vials of perfumed oils. This was no tribute. It was an offering of alliance forged in respect. Moonbeam's future was secure, sealed in unity rather than bloodshed. Skylar's gaze found Xander, now stepping forward with measured courtesy to greet Riverwind's envoy. In the tilt of his chin and the steadiness of his handshake, she saw the legacy of her choices, her runaway flight, her acceptance in Damian's fold, her rise from victim to mother queen. Here was her son, bold and compassionate, destined to build bridges where once there were walls. When the formal greetings ended, Skylar gathered her family beneath the spreading boughs of the great elder oak. Here, Damian raised his goblet and spoke words that became a benediction. Today, we honor the blood we shed, not in hatred, but in defense of what we hold dear, our kin, our land, and our honor. Tomorrow we live in the legacy, children free to love, to lead, to heal. May the roots of Moonbeam run ever deeper, fed by courage, compassion, and the bonds we choose. As the crowd echoed his toast, to Moonbeam, Skylar felt a warm hush settle over her heart. This was the moment she had dreamed of, even in her darkest flight through the woods. A pack united, a brother redeemed, a son crowned in promise, and a line that would carry forward the best of them. Even as laughter and stories wove through the gathering, Skylar's eyes drifted to the horizon. There, against the blush of sunset, she saw the glimmer of Riverwind's campfires, kindled by new allies. Beyond them lay uncharted forests, future challenges, and endless possibilities. She turned back to her children. Marcy's joyful squeal as her twin brother toppled her play wiggled, Xander and Sky sharing a solemn nod as they practiced the brother-sibling secret handshake. In that circle of life, where past pain had given way to present joy, Skylar recognized the true inheritance she would leave. A legacy not written in scars, but in hearts made whole. Not in ancient grudges, but in fresh alliances. Not in the roar of war, but in the quiet strength of peace. And as the last amber light faded from the sky, Skylar closed her eyes and whispered a promise, to her children, to her pack, and to the spirit of the wild that had guided her. We run forward, together. The future lay before them, vast as moonlit fields and bright as newborn dawn. And so the legend of Skylar Mark, once the rejected alpha, endured, woven into the living. Myth of Moonbeam, forever a testament that even the most broken can rise, and that from the deepest shadows, the strongest legacies are born.